Go live on Instagram. Okay, I'm live. Okay, let me go back to the studio. So, hi, if anybody's watching me on a replay. My name is Celeste. I'm a therapist. I'm from Boston. This is the first Wednesday that I am starting a series called What's on Your Mind, where I talk about an issue that we all tend to struggle with, and then I kind of talk about solutions. And so after I talk about the issue we struggle with, I give people an opportunity to ask questions. I used to do this back in 2017. I used to come on this app called Periscope, which is no longer in existence. And I would come on 5 days a week during a lunch break and talk about different things that people struggle with and kind of give people ways to deal with it. So the plan is for this to be every Wednesday, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So wherever you are, you have the opportunity to check it out. And then I will put part of the segment on the podcast so people can have the ability to watch the replay. So today I wanted to talk about our thoughts and how much our thoughts tend to challenge us in ways. And I think that a lot of times, if you're somebody that struggles with negative thoughts, this is for you. And I am streaming on Zoom and on Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. So I'm streaming on different devices. So if I'm doing like this, I'm like looking at people's comments from different places. So my goal is to help you kind of shift the way you think. That's been the premise of everything that I do, is to educate people about the knowledge that I have, because I feel like it's freeing. I've been working with people for over 20 years. And one of the most powerful things that people have come out with is like, oh my gosh, like there's nothing wrong with me. A lot of times things have happened over the years and they've gone unprocessed. And what happens when things go unprocessed is that our mind starts to make those things as facts. Like we're not enough. We're never going to be anything. Those kind of thoughts that play in your head, they're not your thoughts. They're thoughts that are from the experiences, or some people that may have grown up in certain households where they were talked down to in ways. It becomes part of your psyche without you even realizing it. And for some people, like, have learned how to dissociate, and dissociation can take place because your mind can't deal with the pain. And so as a child, dissociation works, right? Because you get through the hard moments. But then when you become an adult and you have all of these life experiences and life things you have to deal with, it's really hard to make a life when you're always dissociating. So I want to talk about thoughts, and I'm going to take this piece of the segment and put it on my podcast. If you don't know, I have a podcast where I talk to people that are doing things to empower other people. This is a new segment that I'm adding on it, where I say, like, what's on your mind? And because I get to work with people, I kind of see trends and things that are going on. And so I wanted to use my platform to help empower people. So thoughts can come out of nowhere. They could come just from you watching TV. I always tell people, one time I remember I was looking at a commercial, and a pizza commercial came on. All of a sudden I started to crave pizza. Right. And so that's an easy thing where I might have been susceptible to wanting pizza. Right. It's very innocent. Pizza's innocent. There are so many other things that we're engaging in that we don't realize is affecting the way we think and feel about ourselves, because it just happens so automatic. If you live in America, we operate off of capitalism, and we tend to try to sell product. And in order for me to sell you a product, I have to make you feel like you're less than and you're not enough, right? And the marketing people do a really good job of that. They do a really good job of making you feel that you're not enough. And so that's where these kind of thoughts can come from, right? And if you don't have discernment to recognize, I had so much discernment to know, like, Celeste, you want this pizza because of the commercial you've seen. And so I was able to recognize that. A lot of people aren't able to recognize that. So that's kind of one thing that's one area where your thoughts can derive from. Another area is your history, like the way you grew up and what you've seen. A lot of times, people have gone through things, sometimes explicitly, where you can be like, yeah, I was abused, that was hard, and this happened, right? There's some times where it's not as in your face, right? Especially I noticed for people where their needs were met, whether you had a roof provided for you, clothes on your back, you seen that your parent or caregiver did the best that they could. A lot of times people have struggles with identifying the areas that they may have struggled with because all of their needs were met. And there's some people that are thinkers, they think very deeply, right? And so sometimes they have overanalyzed the situation. Sometimes it's not as in your face, it's very subtle, where maybe you were singled out, or maybe you were compared to somebody else. There are so many things that may have come up. And so what happens is, for people that aren't aware of how the mind works, the mind is working off of habit. It just keeps going with what you expose it to. I tell people, when we were younger, our parents were probably like, brush your teeth, brush your teeth. Now we don't need nobody to remind us to brush our teeth because it's pretty much a habit. But for a lot of us, when it comes to the mind and the habits, right? And if you think about, if things didn't go well in your life, if a lot of things went wrong, let's say you made some mistakes, out of survival mode, out of impulsivity, you made some mistakes. What happens is your mind starts to think of yourself as, that's the way it is. Oh, you're just a screw up, right? And so your mind starts to look for evidence to keep that mindset going. A lot of people don't realize that, and I always tell people, like, you can choose to be engaged in what you're thinking or not. It's a choice. I will admit that sometimes it's hard to sit still and think about like what you're thinking, because you don't really want to think about yourself in that way. You don't want to think like, dang, I really think that I'm no good. I really don't love myself, right? A lot of times when I see how people are going through life, it's very clear that the love that they have for themselves is just not there. But they don't realize it's that way because it's always been that way. And so for people that are struggling with having a lot of negative thoughts, like ruminating thoughts over and over again, understand that this is something that can change. I think sometimes people think like, well, this is just how it is and I'm always going to be this way. No, this is the way that you learned how to operate, but that doesn't mean you're always going to be that way, right? I always say, if you're still breathing, there's room for change, even if no one's told you that. But it really has to start with your inner voice, right? I remember someone said, you're with yourself all the time, and imagine like you're walking around with your own bully. And so many people are walking around being their own bully. So where does the energy come to do anything that you say you want to do, or to complete those goals that you say you want to complete? Like, it's hard to get to that point if you're always finding yourself talking down to yourself. Any little thing that you do that may have didn't work out or was a mistake, if you're always talking about it in a negative way, it's really hard to operate in life. That's exhausting, right? It's not the same as somebody physically beating you over your head. You can be like, okay, yeah, I feel pain. You know what I mean? When it comes to the emotional stuff and the way that we operate, we don't recognize just how much we can be our biggest barrier to change. It's not the people outside of us. It's not like our family. It's not the things that we've done. It's really the way that we're framing it and thinking about it. And a lot of times you don't recognize that, whether it's your kid or your best friend, if your best friend or somebody that you love came to you with the same scenarios that you beat yourself up about, you won't find yourself being as mean as you are to yourself. You wouldn't do that to someone else. And it's like, well, why do we do that to ourselves, right? And a lot of times we weren't taught how to be kind to ourselves. There's this amazing author. I actually have her book here, um, called All About Love. Her name is Bell Hooks. And she talks about love, and she talks about the way that we have learned about love, right? And a lot of times people tend to look at love as a feeling. They don't realize the acts that involves love, and the way that we've been conditioned to think about love through TV, through what we've seen in our home, the way it was experienced. And so, unfortunately, a lot of people have never learned like what it looks like to love themselves. They just know what it's like to take care of others or pour into others or do for others. And so part of the loving yourself part, really thinking about like, what am I thinking? And so how do I work on these challenging thoughts, right? Because I want to talk about like why it happens and what you can do about it. So if you find yourself struggling with challenging thoughts all the time, I want you to think about pausing, right? And kind of looking at what you're thinking. That can be hard. Like sometimes just to, get in hey Issa, get in a paper and pen and just starting to write down the things that you're thinking about, right? You know why it's powerful to do that? Because you're going to give it less power. When those negative thoughts are in that mind that is very complicated with so many things, and you're all over the place, those thoughts feel real. When you say them out loud, when you write them down, they actually you start to look at it and be like, wait, what? I'll have people that they'll be talking to me and they'll say something that's wild. And I don't even have to make a face. As soon as the words come out their mouth, there was like, dang, that doesn't make no sense. Or dang, I can't believe I think that way about myself. Like you've been thinking it. And I said, you had the audacity to say it out loud to me, talk down to yourself in that way. Imagine what you do when you're by yourself, right? Like that's hard. That's a hard thing to think about, but that's the reality of so many people's lives, is that we are really like talking down to ourselves all the time, and so we're exhausted. And so if you're trying to figure out why the goals that you're trying to work on isn't working out and why changes aren't being made, is because it starts up here, and so start to pause, think about what I'm thinking. That's important, right? And then the next thing you're going to think about is like, what am I feeling and where am I feeling it? Feelings can be very complicated. I try not to say negative feelings. Those hard, vulnerable feelings that you don't want to admit to, whether it's shame, guilt, sadness, feeling overwhelmed. Like nobody wants to admit to that, especially depending on like what kind of environment you was raised in. If you was raised in an environment where some of those emotions seemed like they were weak, right? Especially in the Black community, we can tend to look at some of the emotions that create vulnerability as being weak and not strong. And I just want to give you a different perspective on being strong, because if you are not identifying your emotions and you're operating off of them, making decisions off of them, it actually doesn't make you strong. It makes you weaker, because it's going to show up when you least expect it. You're going to, like I tell people, if you don't make time to deal with what's happening, your system is going to force you into making time. I'm in Boston. There's a study that the Boston Globe did, and the zip code life expectancy in a higher socioeconomic status area, people tend to live longer than the lower where people are experiencing more stress, financial issues, and other things, right? And it's not fair that I think it's not fair that people don't understand the ramifications of stress, because it doesn't just show up and moments where you're blowing up. They're showing up constantly. It's not just because sometimes you may find yourself spazzing out and say, oh my gosh, I'm stressed. People will look good on the outside, and their insides will be struggling. Like a lot of medical conditions derive from stress, and people don't understand it, right? And so when I say pause and then ask yourself what you're feeling and where am I feeling it, I think it's important for us to get more in touch with our body and how our body is responding. The GI doctors are booming in 2024. gastrointestines, I think that's what it stands for. But the doctors that are dealing with like stomach issues, they're booming and there's like this long wait, right? A lot of our gut issues and things that like our anxiety and our stress, they're showing up in our body in different ways. High blood pressure, hypertension, diabetes, like a lot of these medical conditions that are happening. And you don't realize that your body will start to tell you that something's wrong, whether it's migraines, headaches, your stomach's turning a little bit, your back's hurting, your arm, your leg, like you're sweating. Maybe you're moving your fingers like this. So many ways that the stress can show up in our body, and we don't even realize it. Hey, Cynthia, we don't even realize like how much trauma or stress shows up in our system because we weren't taught. We've we've made it a thing to separate the mind and the body, right? You know, you go get your physical, that's recommended. You didn't get a physical, but nobody talks about like how you're taking care of yourself. And I think the conversation has gotten better since the pandemic. But we can still do better with it, and it's not even about sharing with the world, but really being honest with ourselves. That's a powerful thing that we can do. So we're going to pause, right? If you're working on trying to get rid of these negative thoughts, well, you can't always get rid of them, right? Because the thoughts, they just come. But like, how do I not entertain them, right? So we're going to pause and think about like what's happening. Let's write these thoughts down so they don't have power. They have power when they go unchallenged. We write them down, we pause, we think about what we're feeling. Sometimes you're able to name the feeling, sometimes you're not. And if you're not able to name the feeling, pay attention to what you're feeling. And the more you start to get in tune with what you're feeling, the more you start to understand like where these triggers and things are coming from, right? And for people that may not understand what triggers are, there are things that like are affecting you. For instance, let's say that you used to get yelled at growing up by your mom, and she was very short with you. And so you're working with somebody, a coworker that may not be yelling but can be short with you, just kind of give you short answers. The coworker is not your mom, but her giving those short answers are a trigger, right? This happens a lot more often in like intimate relationships. I feel like the vulnerability and the things that go on in relationships, unfortunately, can mimic some of people's like childhood experiences, but it can happen with friendships, with work, those kind of things. And so let's say you're with your coworker and they're being short with you and your stomach starts turning, like you're afraid, like you go back to that little child. I always remind people that there's an inner child in you that shows up. You ever know somebody to act like you're like, why are they acting like a kid? Or why are they spazzing out like that? Because we all have this inner child in us. Some of us have learned how to use discernment and recognize like, oh, I'm talking to my coworker, my stomach is turning because it reminds me of when my mom used to be so short with me. But this is a different story. This is just my coworker, right? And so the importance of doing that is because now your mind can start to be like, oh, okay, so we can chill out, right? But if you don't tell your mind that, oh, this isn't the same situation that happened when I was 10, your mind's not going to know to chill out. It's going to do exactly what it's designed to do. It's going to stay on high alert to work on protecting you because, oh my gosh, this is happening again. That's all your mind knows, is that it's happening again. And so if you're not pausing to think about what you're feeling, if you're not identifying what you're feeling, and if you're not even able to identify what you're feeling, but actually just where is it showing up? Because sometimes your stomach may turn before you realize intellectually something's happening. And then when it comes to these negative thoughts, one of the things I want you to ask yourself is like, where's the evidence? A lot of times there's no evidence, right? Until you're challenged, like, everybody doesn't have the privilege of having a therapist, which is why I even started my whole social media journey back in 2015, is I recognize like how it's a privilege to find a therapist that works for you. And therapy is not the only modality to getting what you need. When I started to recognize that part, and I work with people, I get to challenge them. And it's like, I'm not a rocket scientist, I promise you. It's like everything I say is very simplistic, But it's kind of like when you're not used to being challenged, it just continues to go, right? So when I say what's the evidence, so if you say like, oh, I'm no good, who told you? What you mean you no good? Where did that come from, right? And so people start stuttering and like, when I start to challenge some of the things that they're saying about themselves, they start to recognize like that's not true, right? And so I don't want you to feel like because I don't have a therapist to challenge me that I can't challenge myself. You can absolutely challenge yourself. So as you're writing down those negative thoughts that may have come from somebody and something else, right? You can just say like, well, it's 2024. It's a new day. Like this isn't the same situation that I was in before, right? Like you don't understand how powerful it is to speak power over your life. Words do matter. And people may have heard it before. And the reason why words matter is because your mind is listening, right? And so there's so many things that I've done over the years that I've started, in this entrepreneurship thing that I've done where like my stomach turns. I feel nervous about doing certain things. This thing that I'm doing today doesn't feel nervous because I used to do it all the time. But there are certain new things or ventures that I'm doing that feels like hard. But guess what? Because I just want you to know, just because I feel a certain thing doesn't mean I can't act on it. And the fear that you may feel on the things that you're trying to challenge yourself on or do, because just because logically you know that something isn't good for you and you need something different doesn't mean that it's easy to do it. I wish, like, you know how many books there are out right now that talk about life and how to heal and all this stuff? Like the knowledge is there. It's not the knowledge that's keeping us from getting to where we need to be. It's like that taking that first step and challenging them thoughts and actually like writing them down and seeing like, oh my gosh, like that's a hard sight to see, right? And so it's going to feel hard. You're going to identify that, and that's okay. But you can't let that stop you from getting to where you need to go. Some people have to go to work and don't feel like going to work, but they go to work anyway because, surviving is what a lot of us do. So, if you don't go to work, you can get fired. So you're going to go to work, right? The thing I'm trying to introduce into your life with this new series that I'm doing of what's on your mind is I'm trying to get you to learn how to not just survive life, but add living to your equation, right? And you may say, like, Celeste, what do you mean? Like, I am living and breathing, but you haven't been living. You've been surviving. You've just been going through the motions because going through the motions is what you know, and it feels easier. Even if you say you want peace, even if you say you want to learn how to live life, the action of doing that is challenging. And so my goal is I want to help you challenge yourself by giving you this knowledge to help you understand how things work because it's powerful. I said if I go to the doctor and I'm bleeding everywhere and the doctor be like, yo, Celeste, I don't know what's going on. Like I'm going to be struggling a little bit. You know what I'm saying? I just go home and just keep rewrapping my bandages. That's a hard way to operate in life where you don't know what's going on, but something's happening. And so like physically, it's easy, the doctor gives you the information. Emotionally, like people are like bleeding, like emotionally, right? And they don't understand what's going on. That's a hard way to operate in life. And so I'm going to repeat the things to do and if you have any questions, feel free to ask questions. I'm going to repeat the things. If you're struggling with your thoughts, I want you to think about taking a pause, right? Taking a pause and breathing just allows you to reassess the situation in general. I always say breathing, we have access to breathing. It's something that is very underutilized. So I want you to think about pausing and breathing. I want you to ask yourself, like, what am I feeling and where am I feeling it? Even if you're not able to identify the actual emotion, try to pay attention to like what you're feeling. And then ask yourself, like, what evidence do I have to support this thought? Because a lot of times when you start challenging yourself, you really don't have the evidence to, and you're just going off of habit, going off of that. And that's not a good way to go. So I hope that was helpful. I'm going to take this piece and put it on the podcast. I have one question over here. How do I stop them from being negative? So someone says, how do I stop my thoughts from being negative? So you can't stop them, right? No matter how much work you do on this healing journey, the thoughts are going to come, right? They just come out of nowhere. Sometimes you could have watched a show, right? An innocent show, and your mind starts to think about something in the past. There are a lot of memories that, or a lot of things that have happened that are in our memory bank that we may not consciously understand. But, because the feelings of it, it taps into that part. And there's some things you may never, ever uncover, things that you may have experienced that you never may be able to pinpoint, but you feel it. And I always tell people, if the emotion doesn't match the situation, challenge yourself, because it could be something deeper happening from your history that you may have forgotten about. Right. So it's not that you can stop negative thoughts from coming in. But I like to use the example of like, if you had somebody like living rent free, you open the door, you let them in, and then now you're trying to tell them to pay rent. They don't want to pay rent. You tell them they got to go. It's hard to get them out, right? And that's what happens with these thoughts. They've been living rent free in your head for so long, for so many years. Your system, you're challenged by your own system, because your system is like, what are we doing? We're so used to thinking negative. It feels hard to think opposite, right? If, I used to eat fast food all the time. Burger King's was my favorite. I share it all the time on my podcast. Um, Eating healthy just felt off. It didn't taste good. Now I love the things that I love today. Like, I can eat a raw pepper and like it tastes sweet and I enjoy it. 10 years ago, I would have been like, who's eating that raw pepper? Even though logically I know it's good for me, but I had to get used to the taste, right? It was a very intentional process to change the way that I ate, right? And so when it comes to these thoughts, and I know so many people are riddled with thoughts that are negative, when it comes to these thoughts, it has to be a very intentional process, right? You have to like really be mindful on being intentional on challenging those thoughts and understanding that it doesn't feel good to do. And the reason why it doesn't feel good is because you have been living this way for so long. When you get a fever, your body is trying to fight off an infection because it's introducing a foreign substance, like the infection is foreign, and people will get a fever, right? Does that fever feels horrible, but the body's fighting it off because it's foreign. When it comes to trying to engage in a positive way with yourself, when it comes to trying to create more discipline and to loving yourself, please understand that you're introducing a foreign concept to your life. And so your body may be trying to fight it off, where it's like, oh, I didn't remember to do that. I really want to do that. Like, you really want to do it, but it's not like you're going to remember, like, oh, yeah, I said I was going to like read my Bible tomorrow for 10 minutes or meditate for 10 minutes. Like, you say you want to do it, but then what intention did you put into it? And so the intention behind what you're trying to do matters, because your system is just not used to you having that lifestyle. So it's going to, it's not going to help you remember. It's not going to feel weird if you don't read the Bible or do the meditation that you say you were going to do. Right. So that's why it's important to be intentional about the things that you say you want to do, so that you can help yourself achieve that, because you do have power to achieve it. I don't care. People be like, oh, I'm not a disciplined person. I say you've been consistently inconsistent. That's some consistency. And people look at their history and what they haven't done or didn't do, and they will claim that as, I'm not a consistent person. I can't do this. And I said, you can't claim that, because your mind will keep reminding you that you can't do these things. And that is not okay. That is not fair to you and the things in your future self. And I tell people, be like, oh, all this time has passed, and it's going to keep passing. Time is going to keep passing. And the things you do today, and 6 months from now, you will be grateful that you started today. Right. So I think that's all the questions. So before I go, I just want people to know you have power to create change, right? You do, right? I just shared a lot about the mind. If you came in late, I'm leaving it up for a replay. And also I'm going to put it on the podcast. You have power to create change, but you have to have faith to believe in yourself. And hopefully hearing about how the mind operates, like it's malleable, it can change. You just got to put it in the right environment. A lot of the ways that I think and the way things that I do, I promise you, 15 years ago, I never ever thought this was possible. I never seen myself doing it, but I wanted something different. That's what kept me going in a disciplined way. I placed myself in environments, maybe not literally, like it's not like I had a plethora of people that was like on this journey like that. Like, just know, like that's not typical. That if you find a plethora of people that's on a healing journey with you, like that's amazing. But unfortunately, that's not always possible, right? And so don't let that deter you from going through the process, because guess what? We got so many things at our fingertip. YouTube, we have books, we have so many groups now that you can get online. So don't let the fact that nobody in your vicinity is on this journey stop you. Place yourself in an environment, literally or online or through literature, where you're giving your mind a new narrative. You got to give your mind a new narrative. All right. So I'll be back next Wednesday. Also, if there's ever a topic that you want me to make part of the What's on Your Mind Wednesdays, go to my website. You can I'll put a box there where you can just write the topic that you want to discuss. And I will put it into rotation. I'll also create a schedule so you can kind of know what we're going to talk about. And that way, like, let's say you have questions that you want me to answer on it, but not want to share it while you're on live, it'll already be there. So I'll make sure to add that to the website. So my website is celestethetherapist.com. And then if you are not familiar with my podcast, I'm on all podcasting streaming platforms, and you can find me there at Celeste the Therapist. All right. Thank you guys so much. I'm going to go off.